What's cracking, y'all? It's the YouTube art lovers and art appreciators, lovers of creativity and all that cool stuff. It's your boy Track, aka Track Star Podcast. That cool? We good to go? All right, cool. Just making sure. We are in Yahala Hookah Lounge, so we got a little bit of a different vibe. Gonna have a little bit of music in the background. Gonna catch a little bit of that people talking in the back, so we have that real live, organic feel. You know what it is, the Artist Podcast. I believe this will be episode 9, I think. But yeah, and we have a creative guest every time. This one's a really unique one. I'm really excited about this one because this one is one that works with the creatives, which all on its own, these two guys are very creative just for this idea. I met these two guys at East Austin Studio Tour as well. It was a really exciting experience. I lit up immediately just seeing cool artwork on backpacks. I was just praising them for the cool artwork that was on the bags, and then they was talking about how they collaborate with other artists, and then that's when the Scooby-Doo's instantly intrigued. I'm like, yo, I can get my artwork on some backpacks? That's crazy. And then the magic word residuals came, and then the ears pop up even more. But to introduce these two guys officially, I got my boys Adam and Rusty. These two guys work together. They have their own company called Badass Backpacks. And what they do is they have some really, really awesome design level backpacks. They collaborate with artists that do a variety of different mediums, whether it's ink drawings, paintings, regular drawings, or what have you. People that have a really cool visual aesthetic, and they don't just work with any artist of any sort and just plaster some art on backpacks. They really take pride in providing it an experience and making that experience that means something not only to them but to the people that will forever look at that. And I think that's really, really awesome. But that was my intro of you guys. So thank you, Adam and Rusty, for having me. It was an awesome pleasure just meeting you guys, getting a vibe with y'all, and thank y'all for wanting to work with me on me getting my work on a backpack. I think that's going to be really awesome, really exciting. But I'm really just glad to just get you guys here to talk, because I don't think there's too many times where the creative kids like myself might be from small towns get to talk to other guys like yourself who are so excited to get to work with other artists and get to collaborate on a level that I think can be intriguing to a lot of different people. So once again, thank you guys so much for being on.
Absolutely.
I guess one of the first questions is how did this idea come about? When and how did this idea come about to start making some really cool backpacks and working with artists?
So origin story goes back to a backpack that I had. It was an Invicta backpack, Italian made. I was on a senior trip after high school in Italy, and I saw all of these Invicta backpacks, wild colors. A lot of folks from the 90s might remember these European backpacks. They were popular all over Europe, particularly in Italy. I saw a lot of the foreign exchange students here in the US wearing these kinds of backpacks, and when I got to Italy and I saw these kiosks just floor to ceiling covered in colorful backpacks, I was just absolutely taken and intrigued. I bought one and brought it back with me, and then I used that backpack for the better part of 15 years solid all over the world. And everywhere that I would take that backpack, this bright orange backpack with embroidery and crazy stuff all over it, people would comment and ask, what's the story with that backpack? So there was just something about having that bag, using that bag, and it started so many conversations. It was something that I observed over and over and over. At a certain point in my entrepreneurial sort of arc, I had several different start and fails. At a certain point I realized I wanted to create a certain product, and when I asked what kind of product would I want to create, backpacks was absolutely something that jumped really right to the forefront. And the idea of creating beautiful, loud backpacks was something that I brought to a conversation with Rusty. It was right around 2010, and the only reason I can even remember that year is because my son was born in 2009, so I had a small toddler out and about, and Rusty and I met up to talk about the idea, and that conversation kind of never stopped. I don't know, is that a fair assessment?
I think so, but I don't think you're doing that story the complete justice, because we met up at one of our favorite bars, Bar and Grill, and he was telling me about his backpack, and we had worked together on another startup several years before. We'd known each other for quite a while. We were catching up, but we hadn't really connected in a while. So he's telling me about this backpack. I think your comment about just in general people commenting on and saying, hey, that's really badass, that looks really cool, that's one thing. But what really captivated me and what drew me to the story was he came back from Italy and he was wearing that backpack on campus, and the stranger, somebody who didn't know before, said, you just came from Italy, didn't you? And he was blown away.
Absolutely blown away.
He's like, what is going on? How did you know that?
Yeah.
Do I have something written on my face? But she had actually recognized him from his backpack.
Yeah.
And they struck up a conversation, became lifelong friends. She introduced him to an organization which really changed the course of his young adult life, his student life. I think it's where he met his wife.
It is.
And
a lot of things
it's
happen,
where
yeah.
we met in that organization. So what was really, really cool to me about the story wasn't that, oh, that's something that looks cool. That's something that, oh, you've got great style. That's something that's, pretty unique. It was really that that serendipity, like that special moment, that that item, that artifact basically changed the course of history, changed the course of his life, and I thought, that's really neat. I want to make items that create that magic moment.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, so that's really, really cool. Okay, so this idea, the Italy trip was when?
Well, I went to Italy in 1998.
Oh wow, so you got that bag in 98.
Yeah.
And people were admiring that bag from 98 until 2010 when this idea sparked?
Well, so absolutely. So real quickly, I mean, interestingly enough, Rusty mentions that I met Donna Mottel. Donna Mottel's a close friend of mine, close friend of my wife's, close friend of the family, very important person in my life, very influential person in my life. And she did convince me to join a student organization called ISEC, which ISEC itself also positively changed my life. I lost my train of thought there.
You're all good. Just talking about the time when you got the bag in 98.
Right. So yeah, I'm sorry. That's right. So your question was, were people asking me about it kind of all throughout? First of all, people were complimenting that bag and asking me about that bag everywhere I took it. I lived for 1 year in Argentina, and people were fascinated with the bag in Argentina. I traveled to Bolivia. People in Bolivia were fascinated with it. I traveled all over Europe, Switzerland, Italy, the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, Ireland. I lived in Ireland for a year. All over the world, and including in the United States, people would comment on the bag. Donna Mottel had a startup that she worked on called Badass Canes, which is a completely separate conversation, but I actually did go back to my friend Donna and I said, hey, I've got this idea for these backpacks and I want to call it Badass Backpacks. And really that name, because of having worked on Donna's project Badass Canes, that name was on the tip of my tongue. But in addition to that, in 2010, I was walking into work. A person opened the door for me that morning, looked at my backpack and said, hey, that's a badass backpack. I said, oh, thanks so much. And I loved that compliment. I got that compliment a lot. The following day, like Groundhog Day, I drive to work, I get to work, I park in the same spot, I'm walking up to the building, a different person is there at the door, holds the door for me, thank you so much, and as I'm walking through the door, she compliments me and says, hey, that's a badass backpack. And getting that compliment, that specific compliment 2 days in a row, make no mistake that I got back to my desk, and even though I had toyed with that idea and that name in the past, I wrote that name down. When I brought that name to Rusty, I expressed my excitement, but also some trepidation around that name. And it's kind of hilarious to reflect back on how hesitant I was to just seize that name and roll with it. It was really Rusty who finally convinced me. He's like, Adam, the fucking name of the project is Badass Backpacks. And we've the name for so many reasons. It has a lot of history, it has a lot of depth for what it means to us and what it is we're trying to create. Backpacks that are more than just a backpack.
Yeah, which brings me, I'm glad you said that because that's what brought me to I'm trying to get to this I wanna definitely unpack how you guys. This is bigger than just plastering images on a backpack for you guys, and I don't think it really hit me how deep it was to you guys until we met here and was talking about putting my work on something, and you guys were really big on this, what's the story or how are we gonna. It's bigger than just putting something really cool on. I admire that just so much, but I guess to start to get to that slowly. How did you guys get to this point of realizing that you wanted it to be a little bigger than just finding any image you can?
Sure. So the starting point for that was a lot of noise and a lot of confusion. And from a creative project standpoint, in 2010, coming up with the idea, debating the idea, cussing and discussing it, getting together, like Rusty said, at bars that we would both frequent together, or finding times when we could connect and talk about it. We knew that we wanted to create lots of different bags that had different themes, and when we would talk about those themes, we would come up with and have a lot of fun in the early days, almost like a game show style of how many themes can you come up with, right? And sort of spin the dial and think about, oh, what if we were to make a backpack for this kind of person, or that kind of person, or this kind of journey, or that kind of journey. And eventually, and this is my version of the story, I can't wait to hear Rusty's take on this, because it'll probably be a bit different, but at a certain point, and I don't remember when, at a certain point, it was a beautiful moment here at Yahala, when Rusty kind of grabbed the reins a little bit on some of this scattered energy, and Rusty said, I think I'm seeing a pattern. 70% margin. And that pattern is that when we talk about each of these different bags that we dream of creating, we are noticing that there are 6 different things that we are always talking about. And those 6 different things are the same 6 ingredients that, Kyle, we talked about with you last time we met to talk about a Kyle Williams, a Trackstar backpack. Their art. So what's the art that's going to go on the bag? What's the theme or the name or the concept of the bag? What binds it all together? What's the story that's unfolding as we put the backpack together? How can we make this backpack into a gift? Who is the tribe of people who are going to care about the backpack for any reason at all? And what is the journey, or what kind of movement do we want to see happening once this backpack actually becomes a tangible, real bag that goes into the hands of a customer? So those 6 things, again, are art, theme, story, gift, tribe, and journeys or movement. So when Rusty noticed that pattern, for me, that was a big clicking moment in our creative process, to kind of come back to your point of how do we put intention behind each bag that we're going to go chase, and each bag that we want to put the work in to actually ship this bag. We've got to be really smart about these 6 different things that we know we're going to try and put into that bag.
Right, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm so curious on how this got to you too, because your face instantly kind of lit up a little bit. You laughed, and let's put this in perspective real quick, guys. If myself, Adam, and Rusty were all 3 kids on the playground wanting to play the funnest game, Adam and I are bouncing off the walls with ideas like, let's do this, we're gonna do this, let's play this, let's try this one. Versus Rusty, he's chilling and he's thinking about what he wants to play too, but he's really in my opinion, he's the one that's the most calculated in terms of he's taking it all in. He's thinking about the best possible game versus throwing out 10 to 20 different ideas. Rusty comes in with the one curveball and he's like, yo, that's it, and then boom, that's it. But
it's a good description.
How did you get to noticing that trend of the 6 themes, and how did this moment hit you, Rusty?
Yeah, I like your description on the playground. That's actually
That was off the top.
that's actually how Adam and I work most of the times, and that's one of the reasons why we work so well together, and why this project has continued to gain steam, and we've been able to find the time and energy to continue to devote to it. I think, even from the very beginning, when we were talking about the idea, Adam was just sort of riffing as people do, like, oh, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't this be neat? sort of just bullshitting. And I'm like, yeah, that would be great. Let's do it, and let's make it happen. And we started meeting on a regular basis. And like Adam said, in the early days, it was really sort of thrashing and trying to figure out like what this looked like. Both of us come from sort of the digital world, digital products, and neither of us had ever created a physical product before that we could put out in the world. And a couple of things that really influenced me at the time were, one, I'm a huge geek, and so I'm really interested in like superheroes and fantasy. And one of the things that I had been reading a lot about that I thought was interesting is this idea called psychometry, which is a magic ability or supernatural ability to take in an object or a place or a person and understand or see all the residual information, like the history of that object, like all the stories, the people's hands that it had passed through, the events that took place on a certain site, etc. And so, that idea combined with the idea of creating sort of conversational pieces was something that really stuck out. And then I had also been reading a book called Tribes by Seth Godin. It's my favorite author. I introduced Seth's work to Adam, and now it's his favorite author. And his voice has been really motivational in pushing us along and helping us to think about this project in a completely different way, and to approach it outside of a traditional business model. And the idea of Tribes is, just really understanding a group of people and what their worldview is, what their values are, and how they connect with each other. And so I think in the early days, some of the things that we were throwing out there were like, what if we made a backpack for audiophiles? Like, what would that look like? What would an audiophile really be into? What is something that they can't get from a JanSport or even an Invicta backpack? What's something that represents them as sort of a token or a beacon? What are their needs? We played around with the ideas of like a Tango backpack. What would the form of that be? How would that be different? Like, what if you could wear a backpack while you were tangoing? What would a backpack that would go into space? SpaceX going to Mars, first backpack on Mars. And we were sort of completely pie in the sky, playing with all these wild ideas. And again, like Adam said, the things that stuck out were we wanted to create something that would convey the same ideas as a piece of art. Whenever you go into a gallery, something that really speaks to you. Whenever you're on the street and you see this mural, and it makes you feel a certain way or think a different way about the world, that was what really spoke to me.
And you called it psychomorphy?
Psychometry.
Psychometry. That was my first time hearing that word too. Hey, you called that too. But
Psychometry.
Anytime I hear
I love it.
in my mind instantly, I gotta know what that means.
No, I love it. It's a great word. It's a great concept.
So it's just been a long process of really exploring and then narrowing down and picking a direction and going after that direction and then repeating the process. So once we go deep in one way, again taking a step back, looking at the bigger picture, looking at the opportunities, and continuing to experiment and grow.
I really like that. I love the way you guys' mind works, like in terms of just shooting for the stars right out the gate, thinking about a backpack in space, or just ideas that aren't even conventional ideas, but the fact that you're already I'm like that too. I'm always thinking about the promised land and just the end game and thinking about that so much. So now I'm curious because you said that you guys had a ton of ideas and you guys had a whole bunch of those and then you had to narrow down sort. So how did you guys get to that narrowing down part, to the part where you started working with the first artist?
Sure. A lot of different specific elements to touch on there. One that jumps to mind is that in the process of narrowing it down, what we eventually did come to grips with was we need to figure out which artist and what artwork we want to put onto a bag. And once we can figure that piece out, we know that we want to take what we're learning about producing a bag, and we want to see, can we work with one artist with one bit of artwork, get that artwork onto a bag, and then sell that bag. This is this big challenge question. It was a mystery and it was an experiment. That first bag we made was called Sincerity Inside. We did eventually sort of figure out an artist that we knew we could work with, Cheryl Hicks, the artist for Adam's Choice, the painting that's on Sincerity Inside. She was somebody that I knew personally, and I was able to reach out to her. She was thrilled to collaborate with us on the project. We took her artwork, we got it on a bag, we made 100 of those. She hand-signed those first 100 bags. We called that the first 100, kind of this big experiment. And this was a big question, and it was a thrill to go through that process, to experiment, learn, to fail, to make mistakes, but also to ultimately ship a bag, and to ship a bag to customers that we're still in touch with even today. And that's really cool. The next step from that was, all right, so now that we've seen that we can produce one bag with one artist, there's a couple of other things that we've talked about and tried to figure out. So for example, could we work with one artist to do a set or a series of bags where some of the bags might be different? And that was the next step in that creative arc, was moving from one artist and one bag to working with Ellie Halpin on Self-Reflection. It was a series of bags that we did, 4 different main pieces of artwork that got featured on 4 different bags, all by Ellie Halpin. And it was a process to sort of work with her, figure out how that would go down. And again, a lot of neat things came out of that. Following that, the next big step, which you can kind of see the trajectory of where we're headed to be able to work and collaborate with more people, was a question of, well, we've seen that we can do a round where we've got one bag. We've seen we can do a round where we've got one artist with multiple bags. Can we do a round where we're producing quite a few different bags of quite a few different artists? And our first chance at that rodeo was late last year in 2017. We had a chance to put together a set of 6 different bags featuring 6 different pieces of artwork. It's definitely a lot of fun, and it was neat to see the project evolve that way. And I think what's next for us is just, now that we've seen we can do some of these things and feasibly pull it off, we're at a crossroads now where we're asking ourselves new questions that fall right into what you're asking, which is, okay, so now where can we take it? And how can we start to really work with even more artists to create more beautiful bags, more beautiful opportunities, more beautiful stories, more beautiful connections with more people who might want to take a look at what we've got to offer.
I want to take a step back here, and we can decide if we want to keep this section of the segment or not. But in just like the spirit of being completely candid and honest with you, Kyle, with everybody that we're talking to on the podcast, one of the things, going to the heart of your question of how did we get here, how did we narrow down the options, as much as I'd like to give the impression that we're just like these calculated, brilliant entrepreneurs, and we always had this vision and we always knew where we'd want to go next. The fact of the matter is that a lot of how we got here in the early days was due to our own inexperience, the fact that we had this idea and we wanted to create something, but we had no idea how to do it. We had never made a backpack before. We tried to figure out, like early on, are we going to be hand sewing this ourselves? Do we need to, take some classes and buy a sewing machine? Do we need to figure out like how to screen print fabric? Like we didn't even know where to start. And then even before that, we didn't know what direction we're going to go or how we're going to get the art for the bag, like Adam was saying. And it was a little bit of that necessity in needing to find a piece of art. And a sense of luck. And again, going back to the serendipity, we were at Adam's house, and I was admiring the painting that he mentioned, Adam's Choice, and thought it looked really brilliant and gorgeous, and he started to tell me the story behind that painting. And maybe you want to step in and elaborate on the story really quick.
Sure. Well, yeah, the painting he's speaking of, it is called Adam's Choice. It is in my home. Again, it's a painting by Cheryl Hicks. So when I was in high school, she was my creative writing teacher, Cheryl Hicks was. She was also a journalism teacher and photography teacher, so she had a dark room in her classroom. And once I had a chance to take a class with Cheryl Hicks, I took as many classes with Cheryl as I possibly could in terms of photography, journalism, yearbook, etc. And I just loved her teaching style and learned a lot from her. She's really absolutely stands out as kind of the most influential teacher in my young life. At graduation or near graduation, I had gone to Papyrus in Dallas, Texas on a shopping trip, and I had bought a stack of weird, unique, and odd paper, knowing that this was something I could give to Cheryl Hicks and that she would enjoy it as a gift, and that she would go and make something amazing with it. She was always taking paper and objects and doing installation art and wrapping paper around creative things and making paintings. And she took that paper that I had given her and she made a painting that she ended up calling Adam's Choice. My mom actually ended up buying that painting at an art sale, I guess a couple years later, because my mom gifted that painting to me when I was in college. I graduated from college in 2002. So that painting has stuck with me. It's absolutely an amazing piece, and by all means, to Rusty's point, you know, sort of eyeing it and realizing, hey, this might be a beautiful piece to put on a backpack, and kind of gave us a rampway, and also to his very point, by no means was that coolly and calmly calculated. At the beginning, it was something that we sort of kind of stumbled through and then began, like, had a necessity to ask and say, hey, Cheryl, this is something we're thinking about doing. Are you cool with that? And she was absolutely thrilled to work with us and connect with us, and that was our first bag, and it was, you know, again, it's a joy to be able to say that it shipped and that it worked, and then now it's kind of a question of taking those learnings and getting to that next step.
Awesome.
Well, I mean, going back to, you know, that first bag and that first painting, and the 6 things that are sort of the ingredients that go into each bag, like, that's a perfect example. You know, we had that art there, and that was our starting point. Adam says that was the perfect place to start, and there are all these phrases on the painting that are really, really great and inspirational to us throughout the journey. You know, you can't plan for screen magic, sort of face the front, just putting yourself out there. But it was really that necessity of needing to find that first piece of art so that we could go through, having that personal connection, and then the fact that that painting had a story behind it, and Adam, you know, played a part in that painting's creation and origin, and had that you know, that thread that tied everything together. So that was the art, that was the theme of sort of facing the front, being sincere, that was the story behind the art, and it was a gift, and it inspired us to move. So you asked earlier, like, how did we come up with all these threads that make a backpack more than just a bag? That's the origin, that's the genesis.
Right, that's awesome. Yeah, and I hope by now that the listeners have gathered that this is so much bigger than just a thrift shop item or just a bag that you get at Walmart. That you guys really are providing an experience. And you're taking art and you're essentially making it more art, or a different piece of art. You can be using a piece of art, but you're using it and making it in a way that's totally different, even though you're using some of those images that are already artsy and gorgeous on their own. The fact that you're putting them in different areas, and we're going to talk about this later on, putting them inside the flaps and doing so many different things with them. It's a whole nother piece. It's like taking a 2D piece and then making it a 3D piece in the round that you can do a whole bunch of stuff with.
Absolutely.
I think that's amazing.
Thank you. It is. It's a lot of fun to see it come to life and to push that to life. And I love the way that you framed it, that it actually becomes art itself. And that is absolutely part of the core observation of why we were so excited to be able to sort of figure out these 6 specific things that we could focus on for each bag. Because not only are they specific things that we can talk about and ask questions about for how we're going to put that into the bag, how are we going to put art, how are we going to put theme, how are we going to put a story, how are we going to put a gift, how are we going to connect a group of people in a tribe, and how are we going to put a journey or some movement inside the bag itself. And then when the bag is produced and when it ships, how can the bag itself become art? How can it take on that theme? How can it contribute further to the story? How can it become a gift itself? How can the genesis of that bag be the genesis of a new group of people who are connected because they share this bag and this journey and this buying into this concept that this bag stands for.
Yeah, which makes it so much bigger than just the bag. But and I really appreciate the candidness and just being humble enough to be like, yo, we don't got it all figured out. I love that too, because I project myself with such a confidence sometimes, or a lot of people think that I have more stuff figured out than I do. I'm like, no, I'm just confident I'm gonna get to it. Now, how I'm gonna get to it, I have no fucking idea. But I'm confident I'll get to it, just because I think that I'm confident in persevering through things. But I really appreciate the fact that you're talking about how are we even gonna make the bags. That's what I was curious on. Somebody who wasn't the most resourceful in terms of meeting people and just immediately opening up to them and inviting them to things like we're doing now. How did you guys get to the point of knowing who to find to make these backpacks? How did you, because you guys have a distributor now, how did that process go about?
Sure.
Before we, I'll start and then you can finish it up. I think one of the key moments and the funny, it's kind of a funny story. We were working together at another shop here in town, and we were on a smoke break one time, and we had been working for quite a while to sort of figure out, like, how are we going to sew this together, how are we going to get these materials, like, what are we going to do, looking up, like, patterns online for, you know, how to construct a backpack, you know, finding things on Etsy and YouTube, and, you know, trying to do it ourselves. I think we had planned a couple of weekends, like, I don't know how to sew, but we were going to, you know, just experiment, and I'm sure it would have been
there was a lot of comedy. Yeah, there was a lot of comedy
experience. But one day we were having a smoke break, and I was talking to Adam, and I just said to him, you know, we're churning a lot on trying to figure out how we're going to manufacture or make or produce a product that we had no experience in and no business making at all. And I was like, this doesn't really make sense. Like, people have already figured out how to make a backpack.
Right.
Like, the backpack exists. Like, there are people out there that know how to produce something that you strap on your shoulders and put things inside and zip up and carry your stuff. Why don't we just reach out to some of them? Like, why don't we just partner with somebody that's already figured out? Let's not try to reinvent the wheel here. Let's just redirect our focus and concentrate on making this new type of item, putting this art, transforming this art into a product, and partner with somebody for the actual manufacturing. And so Adam sort of took the lead with that part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you know, I think also humble comedy here. I mean, even after that realization had been reached, and I think it was a eureka moment when we came around to that point in the conversation where Rusty's saying, hey, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, other people have figured this out. It really even after we figured that piece out, which that was such a critical thing to figure out, is, oh man, I'm gonna need some help here, right? And knowing that you need help and that you're willing to ask for help, that was some good guidance and advice I had received from a number of different people in my life, and absolutely was something I was open to. And even still, it took us a while to then be able to find the right people to be able to help us, especially just given where our vocabulary was and how ill-equipped we were to be able to tackle this challenge of, hey, we want to make a bunch of backpacks. How the hell do we do that? Oh, another big eureka moment was Eric Euler, a close friend and partner of Badass Backpacks. He's here in Austin. He's no longer working on the project, but it was a joy to have him along. And he and I want to say it was one of those brainwave things where we kind of stumbled on makersrow.com, very similar timing, and we're emailing each other back and forth saying, hey, check out this new website, check out this new gig, check out this new startup in New York. They're called Makers Row, makersrow.com, and Makers Row still around, still offering great services, and they connect people who have ideas for making products with people who manufacture and make products. And it's an online community where you can sign up as either one, hey, I make things, or hey, I need things made for me. And once you jump in there as a participant, it's kind of its own little marketplace of connecting the dots and helping people say, okay, what kind of manufacturing are you looking for? Search through our database of factories, use these keywords, use these different kinds of things. And the Makers, yeah, it is. It really is an amazing system. Makers Row, so MakersRow.com, makersrow.com, all one word. They're still around. They're really wonderful. Liz Long, shout out to her. She was the consultant from Makers Row that we worked with. And in working with them and purchasing some of their professional services, to be able to sit down with a consultant and say, hey, to Rusty's point, these are the things that we know about our product, right? This is what we know we want to do with our product. We've never made something before. And they guided us through thinking about, you're going to need a designer to draft a tech pack. You're going to need a pattern created off of that tech pack. The person creating that pattern is going to sew together a prototype or a sample, and you're going to need to find a shop that can do some of those design things and then also produce the prototype. And then, of course, after that's done, who are you going to work with that prototype in hand, with the tech pack, with the pattern, with all of the specs? Who are you then going to work with to actually send a lot of raw materials and actually go forward and ship around backpacks? Well, all of those different pieces of the chain of events that have to happen to ship a bag to one of our customers, that was all something that we had to learn. And just being so completely uninformed was an absolute advantage. Oh, very fresh, a huge advantage for us. And also, the context is that it was a huge advantage for us, but you have to have a lot of patience.
Yeah.
Which we knew we had to be patient with ourselves. We don't know what we're doing. We come from the tech world. We don't come from the world of consumer packaged goods, and just all of this vocabulary and all of these steps you kind of have to learn by going through it and project managing that.
Well, another thing about that was a huge advantage to us is we're small and this is a bootstrap project. So we had to learn a lot of this ourselves, and we had to do the research, do the hard work, go out and source the materials, and really like dig in deep and be laser focused on trying to be lean and making smart decisions. It wasn't something where we had a bunch of funding and we could just give it to somebody and say, go make this happen. Like, we were involved every step of the way, and having that experience has kept us so connected to what we're creating and where we want to go next.
Right, yeah. I love that. I think that's really awesome, and I think that's a really good point in terms of not knowing all the variables that are about to come into play can sometimes work out for your benefit, because sometimes if you know all of those variables that you're going to have to dive into, it can be so overwhelming that you can get to overthinking things and then just not even want to try it, versus if you don't know too much, you just go in, and because you guys already had the vision and it was so ingrained in you guys' mind, and you guys wanted it so bad that you're gonna, of course, continue to go through it, whatever you have to get through, just to continue to get through.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. I can really appreciate that as someone, just even with the podcast alone was such a struggle. But see, for me, it was actually the opposite in terms of this, because I was thinking so much that I was thinking that I kept saying I was going to need a tech nerd of some sort to do editing, to be able to put pictures in while it's going in. And then by episode 2, I'm doing it myself. And so many different factors. I was thinking I needed so much. I'm like, Kyle, you can just get a microphone and plug it in your phone, and it's okay. It's just interesting how that works sometimes. Sometimes you kind of have to plan a little bit in terms of knowing some of the variables.
Sure,
and then
of course.
Sometimes you don't want to know all those variables. Just dive into it. I try to tell a lot of people, it's never going to be perfect right off the gate. You just got to know it's not going to be perfect. Just dive into it and continue to learn. I really appreciate that in terms of just you guys' journey.
Yeah.
Come with that. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's part of a bigger trend, a bigger movement, and a bigger thought idea that really popular in the community in the world right now, called Think by Making. And it's all about, instead of just trying to plan everything and then at the end hopefully reach your end result, it's like continually experimenting, putting in the sweat equity, like trying and failing and then trying again, and just discovering new things. And that whole process, that was a big part of us designing the first backpack. It was a big part of us figuring out how we were going to produce these backpacks. And it continues to be a part of sort of the DNA of what we're doing, from how do we get our backpacks to our customers, how do we navigate retail, wholesale, event marketing, how do we do fulfillment, how do we continue to connect with our audience and tell our story, and where do we go next? What other things do we want to experiment with? What other things do we want to try?
Yeah, for sure. And there's so many of those factors right there that I didn't even think about. I can imagine if I didn't have so much about this as you guys. I can imagine how many more questions I would have, just because there's so many factors into some of these things that we never think about. I really like that. But you just keep hitting at the next thing I'm going to talk about. That's right here, Rusty. That's awesome.
I would love you too.
Just to make sure I worded it right. Yeah, let's talk about the evolution of the bag design. I'm certain that it's come quite some time. It seems like you guys already hinted on the first backpack that had the painting. It was just that one image on there, and it started to evolve. I'll never forget our first meeting because it was just such a nice sit down, and I feel like I got to get such a good grand showing y'all because I was just so curious, and we had the time, and you were so fortunate. Thankfully, there was two of y'all, so you could probably do some of the hustling and talking to people while he's just pouring his guts out to me about it. But I'll never forget when you unzipped the bag and you undid the pouch, and there was another picture inside the flap, and I just thought that, I don't know why, that was just the coolest thing to me. Just the fact that you just took that next step to, we already got something that's super nice. Out of 100 people, maybe 5 are gonna actually take enough time to unzip and see that.
Yeah.
And so many people, I imagine, might buy the bag and not even know there's another image inside.
Sure, that has happened.
Crazy.
Absolutely has happened, yeah.
The fact that you guys, it's little things like that that I really appreciate, because you don't have to do something like that. But the fact that you guys care that much to provide that much of an experience, to even put a different image inside the bag. I love that, but I know this was something that came in time. So let's talk about some of the ideas that started to come with it.
Well, yeah, sure, and what you're hitting on right there is a big one, in the sense that is one particular tactic or one particular thing that we do think a lot about and put a lot of work into in terms of what's printed on the inside of the bag. It is one more chance to add that element of gift. And I'll give you an example. We had a buyer right around the holidays. She got her bag right before Christmas. She kind of found out about us in a lightning pinch and reached out and asked if I could have it there before Christmas, and we were excited to do so. We got that bag to that buyer, and in the email she wrote back to me, she had seen the bag on our website, but she had not noticed or understood that there was different imagery on the inside of the bag, and that absolutely took her breath away. And she commented on that heavily, and she talked about how just amazing that was, and that was
And then you love it even more.
And I think that's how she felt, and her relaying that to me made me smile, because I felt like that element of how can we make this bag into a gift by adding extra special surprises and different twists and turns on the inside. That is one way that we can turn it into a gift. It's not the only way you can make our product into a gift, but it's absolutely one of the things that we can add in. And in terms of where that came in our evolution, it's again by looking at these 6 things and sometimes other things as well, but it's just asking ourselves with each bag that we create, we have a beautiful concept here, we have a theme, we have some artwork. How can we take it to the next level? How can we understand what it means even a little bit more, and add that into the experience for the person who's going to buy it and use that bag?
I think adding on to that, the reason we're able to do a lot of those things is, one, because we're so hands-on and intimate with the manufacturing process. So every time we go back to the drawing board with a new design, we're looking for those opportunities to add those additional touches. Like, how can we make this even more unique, even more interesting? Even with the very first bag that we did, we kind of had this idea to just create an Easter egg. So it's probably something not a lot of people have even noticed once they bought the bag. But if you open up the main part of the bag, the the body of the bag. You know, there's like a laptop sleeve you could put other things in, and then hidden in sort of that front is a message. It's a letter, like it's a love letter that we wrote to our fans, and it's something that you wouldn't see on first glance, but if you open it up and you're glancing and you sort of see that, it makes you curious. Like, what is this? What we wanted to have something that was kind of like some treasure hunt, something that you could find, and so we did that for the first part. And so we are, you know, looking for those things to create a better product, more unique product, something to differentiate ourselves on the market, something that's more of an art piece. And it's also just the nature of what we're trying to create, again, because of our own aspirations for the bags, for the products, and creating something sort of designer and luxury, both because that's what we care about, but also because that's what we're able to produce. Like we can do short runs, so we need to make each bag really special. We want to make limited edition products that, you know, people are proud to carry with them.
Right. Yeah, I think, man, that's so dope. And then to unpack that even more, just how you're providing such an experience for people. As we got towards probably like the second half of your full breakdown when I first met you guys, then I got to see the box and how you're just not putting it in a plastic bag and giving it to them. You also have a box with the art image that's on the bag that you put the bag inside, and a print as well. And how about, when did those ideas start to come about?
Yeah, it was, so, and I'll chime in. I'm curious to get Rusty's take on it as well. And I feel like from a very early time, and again, this comes from a naivete and sort of a new, being very green in the consumer packaged goods area. From the very beginning, before, it's just sort of like two kids in high school who decide to form a band, and they come up with a band name, and they dream up everything that's going to happen, and then they finally look at themselves one Saturday evening and they say, okay, what instruments are we going to learn to play, right? And so, and you know, you know, we one of the things that we were doing in the dream stage was talking about our experience with products, artifacts, things that came into our lives, and that there were certainly special items that we would spend time thinking about or mulling over before we would go through with the purchase. A backpack was one of those things that we both talked about. We both enjoy backpacks. We like thinking about our bag. We like thinking about what our bag says about us, and that we would take some time before we would buy a bag. And then when you buy a product, whether it's a bag or a phone or a watch or clothing or a fashion accessory or even just something for your kitchen, the idea of bringing that home and unboxing it, that is a moment when you have an opportunity to connect with your buyer, because they are taking this thing that they've invested in, that they're excited to have, they're opening it, and they're in our case with the backpack, they're being invited on a journey where we say that we have big questions built inside, that we enjoy asking big questions, and that we're not afraid to put that burden on our customers, that, you know, this bag beckons big questions. And so in doing that, how can we slow them down as they receive this item as it actually ships to them? And packaging came up in an early part of the conversation. Packaging is an area where I think we have a lot of runway to do some amazing creative things in the future. We do have a limited budget in the meantime, but I love it that you call that out, because the boxes, the tissue paper, the wrapping, the way that we box our bags is something that I love taking a lot of time with. It's a special part of our experience.
Yeah, it's all about the details. You know, that moment of anticipation, sort of the fantasy around it. I've unboxed my own. I've got, you know, all the boxes. They're a work of art unto themselves. I can't get myself to get rid of them, to recycle them or throw them away, because they're just beautiful. And you can see how that box and that packaging is really important, especially whenever you go to a retail space. It's how you stand out on the shelf. But we sell online, so that's not even a factor. This isn't even something that people use to pick out our bag versus other bags because they're buying online. It's sort of a surprise whenever they get the box. And I've been witness to many of my own friends and colleagues who bought a backpack and have opened it up and just seeing the look of delight and surprise and joy whenever they're lifting the lid, whenever they're unwrapping the tissue paper, and it's really interesting. The other thing that I think Adam has really pushed a lot into the tissue paper that we wrap the bags in, and I think part of that is probably because of his own experience with creating these handcrafted trinkets. He makes these really unique, really interesting envelopes that we put personalized letters in for each of our buyers, but they're made from pieces of art, prints, or made from things that we find in like a magazine or a catalog, and they're just these gorgeous. It makes you stop and take a second look. You know that there's something important inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in those envelopes, interestingly enough, no doubt about it, it's a direct shout out to Cheryl Hicks, again, my creative writing teacher in high school, she would make these envelopes, and just the nature of Cheryl when she's working on something and making something beautiful. She does it there in the plain light of day in the classroom, and of course the students that are curious like myself, well, what are you doing, how are you doing it, and she would show us how she did it. And some of the students, not just myself, but certainly not all of the students, but many of us would talk to her about those envelopes, and she would make such creative things in the way she would fold the paper so that when you opened the envelope you would flip up the lid and you would read something inside, and it would make you go, oh man, just snap. That's so interesting. And it became this vessel and a way to carry a message. And then of course when you couple that together and think about some psychometry, like we talked about earlier, of combining things together, when you think about receiving a message from a friend that is inside of a vessel that has symbolic meaning, and then you open that vessel and there's more symbolic meaning, and then you pull the letter out of that vessel and you read that, and it creates an experience. There's no question about that. And those envelopes that Rusty mentions, like he said, in a number of different places I have taken the time to make envelopes for different settings and different situations, and that is a really good example where a lot of people might just say an envelope. It's an envelope. It's an envelope. Get a white piece of paper. Who gives a fuck, right? It's an envelope. What the fuck are you talking about? But what actually ends up happening is this is no longer just an envelope.
Right.
This is something different, and that it is a very beautiful parallel on what we're trying to do with the backpack. That it is not just a backpack. There is more to this. That there is a theme, there's a story, there's artwork, it's a gift, there's a tribe of people who give a shit about this for one reason or another, and there's a journey and a movement that awaits through a big question that can be posed to you by what this thing is. Right. And that, so, those envelopes, at the beginning I was a little off the grid, and a lot of the backpacks that people would buy, I'm thinking particularly of one bag buyer, Lisa Gita, is a friend of mine who I met in the Alton BA program. And when she bought a bag, I made an envelope for her that I felt like matched her personality, and she told me that she felt like it did. And I had made that envelope by ripping out pages from a beautiful art periodical. It was later pointed out to me that I should probably slow my roll when it comes to tearing apart magazines and taking other artists' artwork without any other permission and creating things like envelopes. But I did so with huge gratitude to the beautiful artwork that was there in front of me, and repurposing it and using it to create something beautiful and meaningful. We have since that time, to Rusty's point, started making our own envelopes, which is even more beautiful because it gives us a chance to think about, for this bag that gets sold and for the person who's going to receive it, how can we add that envelope as one more layer that expresses this artwork means something. It's not just a pretty picture, and if you appreciate it just as a pretty picture, that's beautiful too.
Right, yeah, that's fine.
But if you want to take a deep breath and join us at Yahawa to talk about what it means,
You dig?
we're down for it.
Right.
It's there. There is a layer
Yeah.
beneath.
Right.
Speaking of which, all the packaging, if you are interested in checking out some of what we're actually putting together, of course, buy a backpack, or buy multiple backpacks. But otherwise, we did get a pretty big shout out recently from a design blog focusing particularly on our packaging and how unique and interesting and surreal it was. Do you remember the?
Yes, DigiWrap, and actually
DigiWrap.
DigiWrap are it's the group that I work with to have the custom tissue paper made, and the agency that they're a part of and that they work with is they create beautiful custom packaging and paper and boxes and things like this. On their blog they gave us a shout out, and they gave us a chance to talk about why packaging matters to us. And it's funny that Rusty brought up Seth Godin earlier in the conversation, and another Seth Godin blog post that I really appreciate, where he talks about finding that moment to look at something and to kind of know the sign when you should pause, wait, and slow down. And that is one of the things that I kind of hope our packaging can sometimes do. Is there's this door we want our customers to walk through and to be changed by it. And there's a great quote by Anais Nin that says, "Of magic doors there is this: you do not see them even as you are passing through." And that packaging is that chance to create an invisible magic door where they just slow down. Because they look at the box that came in the mail that they weren't expecting, and it's loud, it's colorful, it's bright, it's got something on it. They know that they bought a backpack, and they look at it and they smile. And so many of our customers have shared with me that when they got that box, that they waited to open it because they were like, whoa, hold on. And that again is confirmation for me that we were resonating and hitting on some of the right notes, because if they can slow down and just say, hey, wait a minute, let me look at this. They can then open it, and they can see that tissue paper, they can see that envelope, they can make their way through it however they might. I've watched several people unbox these bags. Some people absolutely tear right through the tissue paper and don't even notice, the tiny watermark that we put in the corner, or the opacity that we faded into the middle for our logo, or whatever it might be that we've done on that tissue paper to make it special. But some folks really do slow down, and they take a moment to look at it and ask themselves what's going on. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, and to me, these just, I'm a flex, like I'm a part of you guys' crew, but these are just because I appreciate passion to this degree, whether it's for anything, but these guys are the differences between a kid that just goes and picks a random bag because he needs one for school shopping, and the kid that gets this. And when you put this much detail in it, this is the difference to make a kid have this backpack for years, and not just with the broken strap. The straps might break and they still carry it just because this bag means so much more to them, because they remember when they got that box. They might still have that box at home. They might still have the tissue.
And what you're describing is something that we aspire to and hope for, and I do know that for many of my customers it has absolutely been the case, and some of our bags have been around since late 2015, and so they've had pretty much 2 years kind of out there in the wild, and they're absolutely still going. I of course wore my Invicta backpack really to its death, and for 15 years, and right at the very end, it was really hanging on by a thread. It was time to get a new bag. But by all means, it was very important to me in much the way that you're describing. And I think it would be an aspiration of ours to look at a particular theme, for example, Sincerity Inside, or the self-reflection theme that we played on, and to put that theme and that concept and that story and that gift in someone's hands where they wear that bag, they carry that bag, and that it does become part of their journey and becomes part of where, actually I'll give you another example, a shout out here to a friend of mine, Corey Podrosky, who works at Spreadfast, a technology company here in Austin, Texas. Corey's a friend of mine from past lives where we worked together. Corey took a bag. He did me a favor of taking one of our bags for a test run to give me some feedback. Then he put that backpack on. He used it for a month. He traveled to North Carolina. He traveled to New York. He traveled around a little bit, and then he was also here in Austin, Texas, doing his daily commute on his bike, on the train, in his car, and he took that bag with him. We recently had lunch, Corey and I, to talk about this month with this bag. And check this out. One of my favorite things that I got from that conversation was at the very, very end, after the tab had been paid, after the hugs had been given, after the high fives had been given, and I had taken notes, and we had talked about a lot of different things. We're walking out of Frank, downtown where we were eating, downtown Austin, and on the street, as we're parting ways, he says, you know, one more thing. I should have mentioned and told you that absolutely one of the most joyous things about this bag is that by all means, as I would put it on and as I would get ready to use it, it absolutely made me slow down to think about what am I choosing to bring with me. This bag is about self-reflection, and the theme had enough of a catch, and just for him to tell me that and share that with me was a huge win for me, because that is part of what we're trying to impart and put into the product. And it doesn't always come through. It doesn't come through for every buyer. It doesn't come through for every person. But when it can come through, I can kind of feel like, boom, that's a victory.
This is why we do it.
Yeah,
Exactly,
which is a beautiful thing.
You'll let those, like I was saying earlier, the 5 that might notice the inside flap. You'll let the 95 go by that don't notice it, just for those 5 that flip out when they open
Absolutely.
it up and see that. Yeah, those are the differences. That's what makes it bigger than just a backpack. To the point to where they might get that backpack. They see somebody else go, I'll give you X amount of dollars for that backpack, or how much for the backpack? Like, no, I'd never sell these. I would never sell these because
That's
blank,
hilarious.
blank, 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 blank.
That's hilarious that you say that, and I think we get into a little bit of daydream mode for our own aspirations, because it's a little bit over our skis or a little bit ahead of ourselves. But I love what you just described, because I could say, for example, a dream aspiration of mine would be, for that very moment to hit. If I could tell you actually a quick story, one of the questions that Rusty posed is a kind of a challenge question, but I found it to be very, very provocative and very interesting. A long while back, Rusty pointed out and said, with each of these bags that we're putting together, it would be an interesting thing to convene a lot of badass backpack wearers in one place, to have them share their stories of what their bags have been through, and then to ask them what would it take for every person in this room to swap their backpack with someone else. And the question in the experiment, because we've never done this before, but the question at hand is, for me and my Invicta backpack that had become such a part of my journey, what would it take for me to part ways with my Invicta backpack? And it is, and it's kind of a silly question too, but here's what's interesting for me and my Invicta backpack. Are you kidding me? No. The answer is no. You're gonna have, but as I say that, you put a compelling story in front of me.
Yeah.
Where the Invicta backpack is gonna go on a journey and swap to be in the hands of somebody who is doing what, right? And going where? And that opportunity to send that bag on a journey, and the opportunity to swap and receive a backpack from another person that has something beautiful that I perhaps maybe can't afford to buy that extra new badass backpack, but here I have a chance to get this beautiful, amazing, badass backpack that also has a journey and a story that comes with it.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the idea of, there's a story of how a backpack came to be, but then there's also the story of what happens next. And going back to that psychometry, that as you take the backpack with you, it's sort of gathering experiences. It's almost like a companion or, a friend, a travel partner. And so it becomes your own conversational piece. You can talk about where you've taken this backpack. You can show pictures. You can talk about your experiences, and then when you give it to someone else and you get their backpack, can you sort of share a little bit of those experiences and create that connection, and it becomes something even more phenomenal. It becomes a true conversation piece, and then the next time somebody sees your new backpack and they ask you about it and where you got it, you've got a much richer tale to tell that person.
Right. With that comes the not so fun part for creative people like me. So I hate when you get into the idea of doing something you're passionate about. it's very hard to put a price on those things. It's very hard to. But then with that, anybody who's curious or anybody who's put pieces together in terms of the box, even the tissue paper, the envelopes,
Sure.
all of these things, anybody who's analytical enough is adding stuff up and go, okay, now how much do these cost?
Yeah.
Because like you're saying, this isn't just some bag that you just get on in any store. These are an experience. So how did you guys get to the price points? And we'll unpack the residuals with the artist in a second. But how did you guys just get to the comfortable spot of how much you was gonna price this bag? Because for what it's worth, these are worth more than just some black bag you're gonna get something.
Sure. No, absolutely. We one of the things Rusty mentioned earlier was a tendency that we had from the very beginning and throughout the entire history of this project to approach things a little bit differently. At the same time, there is the balance and there is the hard reality that we are bootstrapped, we have limitations, we have built-in constraints around how much money we have and how we're going to actually put something together and pull it off. And so pricing, by all means, is a huge conversation for us, and it's a conversation that we always revisit, and we're always looking at. I mean, look, there is the cool thing about consumer packaged goods as a newbie to the industry. It's very different than the world of tech. Part of the definition of a business, when you're looking to provide value and create a service that people are willing to pay for. And so for the business to be viable, there's a core fundamental definition of being a business and staying in business and staying sustainable, where you simply say, the price that they're going to pay is going to allow us to keep doing this. And so there is the math, very neat, that different than the tech world. The math in consumer packaged goods comes down to cost of goods sold. How much money do you have to put in to buy the fabric, to cut the fabric, to print the fabric, and then cut that fabric, get all of that fabric shipped and logistic and kind of supply chain, get that to the person who's going to make it, get it made, get it back in your hands, and get it packaged, wrapped, and ready to ship to a customer. So there's the hard cost as you look along, and those costs
Just to make a bag.
and those costs in terms of how we approach that. Lots of learning, lots of bumps along the way at the beginning, but it was very easy to put the puzzle together, where you say, this is a puzzle. I'm putting it together. Where does this piece go? I'm not sure yet, not sure about this, but you've got all of the pieces in front of you. And we formed a pie chart. I mean, I pulled up Excel, and in between Excel and Keynote on my Mac computer, I was able to put together some pie charts and sort of say, this is how much money it's taking us to put these bags together. This is how much we want to make sure we're able to pay our artists. And then, how do we put all of that together at a price point that's going to work for our customers? So that's a long answer and kind of a little bit of a...
Well, I think that's part of it, but expanding on that, some of it has to do with the decisions we made for design and manufacturing, that we wanted to create something completely original, unique, new, that wasn't on the market. Not just the idea of putting art on the bags, but creating a bag that was well constructed and worthy of displaying that art, and having the space to breathe new life and tell that story and be a canvas that you can take with you. And so, we designed it from scratch. We designed the pattern and the tech pack, and it's a completely original product. We didn't go to somebody and say, oh, we're going to take your bag and put art on it. We created that and figured out what would work best with our product. We also really care about the quality of our bags. We wanted to create something that was durable and long-lasting, that was high quality, that felt really good and comfortable, and that people could take with them on their daily adventures in urban life. And so we deliberately chose high quality materials, and both because we cared about the construction and manufacturing, and also because of how we wanted to move this project forward and the speed that we wanted to move at. With these artists, we also chose to do all our manufacturing in the U.S. So that's another factor that contributes to the bigger picture of what we're creating in the product. Adam also mentioned what we pay the artists. We're working very closely with all the artists we use to produce these bags, and coming from the arts community, and also working in sort of marketing and bigger business, it was very important to us to form a good relationship, form a healthy relationship, and to not take advantage of anybody, and to create a compelling project that would help us continue making these bags, but would also reward the artists and give them a fair value for what they're creating and what they're adding to the project. So, that's a big part of everything that goes into the bags. And then the last thing, that's all sort of the numbers and behind the scenes and how the math adds up. The last thing is really thinking about what we're creating, the value of the product itself, and where we place it in the market. We really see these bags as a unique work of art, as a canvas piece. This isn't just a mass manufactured pattern that we're trying to put into REI. These aren't your typical JanSport backpacks, and we're not trying to create a bag that is just a cheap throwaway that you use for half a year and then pick up something new. We wanted to create something that was really meaningful and had a lot of value, and so we intentionally created and subsequently priced a luxury designer good, something that was equivalent to maybe what you would pay if you were buying a work of art in a gallery.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense, and people can be in a cheap mindset if they want to be, but you guys are getting quality art from quality artists, so it only makes sense to put it on. If you're going to use that art, put it on something and work with that artist. It has to be on something of a quality nature, otherwise that contradicts, and that just wouldn't make much sense for the artists themselves to co-sign with something that isn't going to last, because then at that point it's just kind of off. That just wouldn't match. But I think I just admire it so much that you guys were, like I said at the beginning, kind of joked around about it, but just seriously, just the fact that you guys were just so into the residual side of making sure that the artists got some too. And I just thought that was really, really dope, to say the least. And the fact that you guys have broken this down into two different ways, which was just by off of the residual of the backpack itself, but like you're saying, this is an experience of sorts. So you have the box, and that has artwork on it too, but then you also have a print in there as well, and the artist also gets money for that print sold too, correct?
Right.
And that's just really, really awesome, the fact that you guys pie charted that and made sure that you guys put that into percentage to give that to the artist. And the bags are, I don't want to misquote it, but the bags are $300, correct?
So yeah, it's an interesting question. In terms of the bag design that we have now, if you go on our website, you'll see bags priced from $250, and you'll see bags priced all the way up to $350. Interestingly enough, the average spot right in between $250 and $350. We are headed in a direction where you take a look at the bags that are on our site. This is kind of a heads up to people who are paying close attention. Our pricing this year will likely really change, and the pricing around that is exactly as you said, $300 for the style backpack that you see now. Some of that, in terms of where we've been in the past and how we landed on these prices, some of that's been experimentation, some of it's been agreements with artists, some of it's been cost along in the way of cutting and raw materials and making and all of that. That's fine, and that's shifted out. To answer your question, when you look at the style bag that we've been able to ship in the past, we've recently revisited conversations on price, and I think one of the things that will be meaningful to our artists, to our patrons, to our customers, to everybody involved in the project, is to really bring things into check and say, look, for this style bag and for this type experience, this is how much it costs. And yes, it's $300. And then when you look at some of the opportunities going forward, we have dreams, right? We have the idea that we're going to be able to create a new bag design that doesn't involve as much fabric, that doesn't have as many pockets or zippers and things like that, and bring the cost down on a bag like that, where you're simplifying things. It allows us to create a product that's still extremely meaningful, still extremely beautiful, but since it does cost less to make, it costs less to our customer. And so absolutely, so by all means, that kind of work on our part, when you look into the future, gives us a chance to say, hey, we still want to create products that have everything we've talked about in this conversation, but could we create a bag, again, a more simple bag, and let's say that the price point could be around $200 for that particular bag, and then it could be $300 for this more iconic laptop book bag style that we have now. And then, hey, take it further. Why can't we dream? Could we potentially be creating backpacks, like Rusty said earlier, that have a design that allows us to explore the things we want to explore, but that it might cost even more to make. Just that it has exactly that it has more features, more functionality, more things happening. And as we are able to hit those milestones, as we inch along and evolve and grow, our pricing is going to grow and evolve with all of that. So keep your eye on our prices. For people who are paying close attention, 2018 I think is a year where part of what we want to do is come up with a cleaner front message to our audience to make things make sense. Right now, by all means, we have had buyers who have said to me, wait a minute, I'm a little confused because Sincerity Inside is $350 as our first backpack that we made. We still have a few of those left that we're selling. And that's a hand-signed backpack that took a lot of different resources going into it to get it made. It's a little bit different. Some of the materials on that bag are different than some of the materials on some of our newer bags, right? So Self-Reflection you see on our website for $250, right? And I do think that's confusing. So we've got to clean that up. But in the meantime,
though, you're on a journey of yourselves.
Absolutely.
To provide journeys for the world. In the
it is where we are, and you can see the prices on our website by all means.
Right. But just the fact that, I can't stress that enough. How many factors are going into making these bags? All of the different costs that you guys have to calculate, and you're breaking off the artist too for something that they already made. And if they're anything like me, I didn't walk in thinking, oh, I'm gonna meet some guys that are putting art on some dope stuff and be able to make money off that. So it's like that's just awesome to me because we're gonna work with if I'm blessed enough to get my stuff in the bag.
Absolutely, yeah.
That I wasn't making any money off of at that moment anyway. So if I'm gonna already have something that I care so much about, and if I can slide it in a way that's really, really awesome,
Sure.
makes a lot of sense, why not get a little residual off of that? And
Sure.
get to sell prints too, and get to make it on such a nice experience. You'd be a fool not to entertain that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you giving that shout out. Again, we are talking with Kyle about making a bag, and it is actually a very critical part of behind the scenes when you look at our planning, when you look at our modeling, when you look at how we want to put things together in some of the work that we're doing. Paying the artist is absolutely a key point that we have discussed a lot, and we keep it front and center. There's a couple of elements to it. One is that when we talk about who's going to care about the bag, one of the people we want to care about the bag is the artist. We don't want the artist to be in a position where they feel like they made a mistake working with us and collaborating with us. We want them to feel really good about the fact that when they see the output and they see this backpack, that they would hold it up in front of someone and be proud. And I just give you an example, putting myself a little bit on the spot, but at East Austin Studio Tour where I met Kyle, Patrick Moran was showing at the same location where we were. We were sponsoring Articulation ATX, and there were a couple times when Patrick would bring people that were admiring his artwork, and he would bring them over to look at the backpack, and that felt very good to see Patrick being excited about that. Not just Patrick, there was another artist there as well, and Alva Weeding, local artist here in town. One of her backpacks was there, same thing. That felt very good that she was excited to bring people over. Yeah, and so that is one layer of it. Another layer of that is gift, right? That this is one more chance when you say, what can we put into the bag so that it becomes a gift for the person buying it? And one more thing that we can do to turn the bag into a gift is for the artist to be able to say, hey, that when they sell that and it has my artwork on it and it goes out there into that world, that I get compensated for the fact that I'm part of that story. So by all means, it is a front and center item. I appreciate you calling it out. And anybody listening that might be thinking they'd want to collaborate with us, like Kyle says, we have a goal to compensate the artist.
Right. And they're gonna push you too, and not in a bad way. I mean, in a very, very good way. They're not just gonna look for 5 to 6 images that look awesome and say, yeah, let's pick those 6 and put them on there. No, like I brought my portfolios here. It was a real brain game to figure out, okay, well, why do we want this stuff? And that was that's very important. That's very important because anybody can be like me that just I take pride in being a machine. I crank out a lot of artwork, but I don't want to just randomly put a whole bunch of stuff out without much thought into it. And sometimes my energy can get into such a let's do this, and do this. But the fact that you guys kind of hit the brakes a little bit, like, oh, slow down, killer. Let's we got some nice stuff here, but let's figure out what we're gonna do so we can make sure that we're providing that experience. And that's amazing. That's amazing.
I appreciate you calling. Can I add one more thing onto that? Sorry, I put my hand out there. So I put my hand out towards Kyle. I thought I was shaking his hand. No, so I love what Kyle just said, and there's a question that comes up when we are looking at creating a beautiful object. That is, what does this mean? And sometimes we might say, well, why? We're creating beautiful backpacks. Why are we doing that? And what's the meaning of this? When we, to Kyle's point, if we're looking and working with an artist and collaborating, and we might want to look at a portfolio and say, okay, well, that's interesting or that's beautiful, but why? Or what does this mean? And this is one of the places where I value Rusty's partnership so immensely, because I love way the fuck too much the question, but what does this mean, right? I really love that question, and I will swim in that all day and twice on Sundays. I just Rusty and I, very fortunate in our friendship and in our relationship throughout the years. In 2011, we were in Washington, D.C. by chance at the same time. And we went on a walk. And Rusty gave me that time and space to entertain all of these questions of what does this mean and why, and these big questions about who we are and who we are becoming and all of this space. And then he was also able, after a very long walk and a very long conversation in a foreign city to both of us that we very much enjoyed a lot, and he said, I think you might be taking it all a little bit too seriously. And I feel like throughout our relationship, that's been something that Rusty's been able to do, is that there is a balance, and it is very beautiful to go swimming in that space of what does this all mean.
Yeah, right.
And then at a certain point as well, it's also one of the things that Rusty used to do that would annoy me a little bit, but I think it was part of to break the ice, is he would use humor to sort of say, like, to make a joke, for example, at the right timing where I'm getting a little ahead of it. So I don't know if you have a take on that, Rusty, of what I'm talking about, or if that's resonating with you, but it's something that I've certainly seen happening in this project.
Yeah. Well, building on that and building on what Kyle was describing, we decided very, very early on in the process that we were not in the business of licensing artwork and creating mass-produced backpacks and, just creating like these crazy simple patterns that you might see on other bags in the market. We wanted to create something that was really robust and really unique, that captured a certain quality of the art. And in particular, I'm a huge art fanatic myself, and I love paintings that you can just stare into and start to ask some of those questions that you're talking about. And so we take very seriously the vetting process and the creative collaboration that we do with each of our artists. Like, we won't work with an artist who just sends us a piece of art and says, make this a backpack. Like, we take very seriously the fact that this needs to be something that we can create together, and something that has a real depth and a real quality to it. I lost my train of thought there, but I think that's sort of what we're trying to get to, is creating something that's one of a kind.
Yeah, it's always huge, which once again, great transition. Rusty brings me to the communicating part with that artist. Just like you said, you're not just going to work with somebody, just, I want that, put it on the backpack. No, it's deeper than that. We're going to, granted, the balance. We're not going to get super, super deep. We're not going to go too deep, but we need to have some depth to it, right? So how does that conversation go in? Just to, real quick, you're the one that does some of the the designing in terms of where the images go on the bag, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, gotcha. So how does this part go with working with the other artists? Because I know some of these questions, but for listeners' sake.
Yeah, I mean, it really starts with understanding, if we're inspired by a particular piece of art or a particular style, and trying to understand like what is important to the artists. What are their values? What are some of the stories and experiences that have brought them to where they are today, and then brought them to us and have shaped what they're putting out into the world, and what messages are they trying to communicate with their fans, and then how can we take those aspects and those messages and elevate them and create something new, a wearable work of art, something that somebody's going to take with them on a regular basis. So we worked with an artist, Clint Watson. He's a comic book illustrator, and he was really, grappling with the theme. Or actually, we talked to him first off. We approached him and we had this idea. Like, we always talk about the story behind the art and the story behind the bags. And again, joking, I thought, well, let's try something new. What if we actually put a story on a bag? I knew he was a comic book artist, and I thought it would be really cool to have like a series of panels or a series of scenes, so you could basically read a backpack. And so we talked to him and tried to come up with like a plot line, and he played around with this idea of Lost in the Woods, and that's WOULD, woods. Like, would you do this? Would I have done that? Based on the relationship between people, like a romantic relationship, what if I had made a different decision? What if we had gone to that event? What if I had said this at this time? Like, what would my life look like? What would our relationship look like? What twists and turns and what events would transpire if we had done something different? And so that's where we sort of took that idea. So it wasn't, just a matter of, hey, draw a pretty picture. Like, let's come up with a story. Let's come up with sort of a bigger picture and see where we can take that. And then a lot of the artists we work with, we mentioned this earlier, but we work with a wide variety of artists. So traditional painters, people who do mixed media on canvas, comic book illustrators, a photographer. We're working with a poet. We work with another artist, Matt Hill, who does paper cut art and light photography. And so, the artists we work with are used to expressing themselves on one medium, and we have a conversation with them about what is the experience that their customers have on that medium, and how can we create either a similar experience or a completely new experience on a backpack.
Let me chime in though here, and I get to play the Rusty role for a moment, because the all true and spot on for what Rusty just said, but it also sounds just a little bit too much like we've actually got our shit together. And I think it is worth stating, kind of going back to something he had pointed out earlier, that there is quite a bit of improvisational work at play when it comes to collaborating with the artist, and some of it. I will say this: there. Throughout the process, especially early on, of really mulling over and pushing and pulling and getting things down on paper and thinking about how we wanted to approach, why we're doing this, how we're doing it, and what it is that we're actually accomplishing. Rusty pointed out that, I'll give you one example. This is one example. I'm going to see if I can think of a couple of others. The values that we go into an interaction with are going to be more important than necessarily the specified process. Because we can have a specified process, we can have specific things we want to ask about. I'll give one example of that is when we work with an artist, we want to talk about these 6 things. We want to talk about the artwork being on the bag. We want to talk about the theme and the concept that binds it together. We want to talk about the story of this happening. We want to talk about the gift, the tribe, the journey, and the movements. We want to talk about all 6 of those things. So make no mistake that that's going to be part of the conversation. But as we've worked with different artists, we've seen different things happen. I also want to point out part of what I mean by we don't have it all together is there have been quite a few collaborations that we've had that have fallen apart. And some of those collaborations that have fallen apart at different junctures. Some of them fell apart after the very first meeting. That's nice and simple because you kind of just pick up on the cue pretty quickly. This ain't gonna happen, and it fell apart. Others have fallen apart, and it blows my mind. But you're a far way into this project, and all of a sudden, different things come up, and it's just not going to work. That happens too. And I think some of the values that we've actually focused on explicitly talking about around the campfire, or around the hookah, or around coffee, or whatever it might be. Some of those values have translated into being the more important part of what we're actually doing. One value that there's a long talking, and the example I was going to share with you is the value of not faking the funk. So it's funny we're recording this conversation because many years ago we were at Rusty's house where he was living with his friend Pam in North Austin on North Street or North Lane, something like that. So we're at his house, we're on the front porch, it's late at night, and we were actually recording some conversations we were having about this project. And in one of those recordings, there's a very pertinent moment where Rusty points out that I'm working too hard at wordsmithing something to make it sound exactly right, and it's feeling too much like it's pretending. And one of the things Rusty says on that recording is we should never pretend to be something that we are not. Now that's a very simple statement, might not sound that profound, but that is a value that we've come back to. We've blogged about it, we've talked about it, and we catch ourselves. One of the ways we framed it is we've said a value of don't fake the funk. Yeah. And as an artist and as a creative, I would encourage anyone listening to this podcast that is in the creative world to pull out that measuring stick every now and then to hold up to your work and sort of look at where is it that you're over-engineering it and faking that funk just a little bit too much or choreographing just a little bit too much, because letting go and adding a bit of improv, adding a little bit of going with the flow, adding some openness to the fact that things might change or go a different direction with each of these artists you're working with, you're going to have to explore and see where things might go. Depending on how much time we have, we can also talk about some of those failures as well, because those are some of the most interesting places where you just kind of learn and go, oh wow, that didn't go the way I expected it to go, and sometimes that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
One other thing that I wanted to note, because this was a kind of a key insightful moment for me at East Austin Studio Tour, is I'm an artist myself. I do a lot of drawing and illustration, graphic art. I'm a designer by trade, and we had our booth set up, and one of my colleagues from the design agency came by, and he was looking at our bags, and he was really impressed with what we had there, and I was telling him the story, and he asked me, so which of these bags is yours? And it took me aback for a second. I was kind of embarrassed to tell him, actually none of these are my artwork. Like, my artwork is not on any of the bags. Like, we work with other artists, and I was a little bit embarrassed by that fact that I hadn't created a bag myself. Being an artist, that's something that's really important to me. But thinking back on it later, I realized that it's really important to me. A little bit of myself and a little bit of Adam is in every single one of those bags, because of the collaborative process, because of the relationship that we have with the artist, because of sort of the production work that we do, because of the directing
and the stories
that we do to make something unique, and that's a key factor. That's something that continues to be important as we move through with new designs. Is that a little piece of everyone involved goes into making this bag.
Right. Yeah. I think it's worth noting for maybe for if there's one artist that listens to this in the future and thinks, yo, I think I'd like to collab with them, but then gets to overthinking so much, like, oh, well, they wouldn't want to work with me because of blank. I think it can be very important to talk about the openness in terms of how open you guys have to be with how open the artist is, and if you guys could really quick talk about those two differences between the artist that comes in with their vision and they're pretty stuck on that vision versus a Patrick Moran who is very open with letting you guys experiment to something that came out phenomenal. And both of those can have phenomenal outcomes, but I think that's kind of important to talk about those differences.
Yeah, we've had both of those experiences. One of the things I always tell Adam is, and I think we told you whenever we met with you, Kyle, is that we want the bag and the artwork that goes in the bag to reflect what the artist values and the sort of the message and the key idea, the key concept that is important to that artist. We don't want to, completely overtake the art direction. We'll push and pull and we'll probe and we'll, ask questions and explore topics that we think are interesting to us to try to come up with something together. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to consensus because we want the artist to feel really good about what they're creating. We want it to reflect their own values, and we want each bag to be more of a sort of a stamp of or a thumbprint of that artist than it is for us. But at the end of the day, on the other side of the spectrum, we are running a particular art project, and we are looking for certain types of art and certain types of messages, and we have a pretty high standard for what we're trying to put out to the market, and we need to make decisions about whether or not to proceed with a particular idea based upon whether or not it fits with our vision, and what we're trying to create with the entire variety, the entire offering, and then something that we think our customers, our tribe, our followers, and our fans, it's meaningful to them, and it's something that they'd be interested in.
Yeah. On both sides of the spectrum, the collaborative process can absolutely fall apart on either side, meaning that it can fall apart from the side where the artist either doesn't feel like they can create something that's going to work for what we're trying to do, or doesn't want to create something like what we're trying to do. That's fine. That happens. We've seen it in kind of both ways. Or it might be something where we're looking at it going, you know what, this isn't jiving, this isn't working, and we're not getting to where we need to be able to ship something that's going to be able to, like Rusty said, hit that high standard of this is a badass backpack, but this has art, this has a theme, there is a story, it can be a gift, there's a tribe of people who care, and it can go out there and become part of somebody's journey.
Yeah. Within this whole process, do you guys think that there's a percentage of artists that this happens with in terms of the fork in the road happening?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Or is it just random every time?
And I think this part, it was so. I mean, I could definitely talk out of my ass and pull out a percentage. I don't have a specific percentage, and it is kind of hard and weird and random to go back and sort of cycle through and think about all of the projects that we've had that have just fallen apart. They're certainly there. I don't know that it's a percentage. I don't know that it's a portion of the artists we work with. I think, again, this comes down to where we're still trying to evolve and get our act together to where it's a little bit more of a repeatable process to a certain degree, with a bit of that improv sprinkled in. The projects that have fallen apart for a couple of different reasons. And I think, you can begin to categorize what sort of some of the behaviors or some of the things that we've identified and seeing like, hey, when this happens, this is typically going to fall apart. And sure enough, it kind of falls apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, anyway, and then now this conversation makes my mind drift to sort of just from a creative process, some of the things that make my own creative process fall apart. And one of the things when I'm working on a new bag or a new creative process and I'm exploring something and looking at something, where it can just fall apart, where I can say, this idea doesn't have the legs to sort of persist and stick through. I'll give you a really good example. There was a juncture of time where I would bring to each of our meetings, our Backpacks for Dinner sessions once a week with Rusty, and I would say, I really want to explore the idea of a backpack made for the beach. And Rusty would entertain that conversation. Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and we would explore it, we'd talk about it, and finally one day Rusty's kind of like, hey man, it's a great concept, great idea, but we got too much other shit going on. We don't have time for this. Where it's just this thing that's simmering over here. It's taking all this cycle and all this time and all this thought and all this energy. Silence that, right? And where there's an idea that's not worthy of persisting with, sure enough, it fell off the front radar, front burner. It fell off the back burner, and then it eventually drifted into. We still haven't made a backpack made for the beach, and I don't know at what point we might ever explore that again in the future. The point is, it wasn't something that was going to stick around. And I think observing and seeing some of those projects that we've worked on that aren't going to stick around and persist, or that we don't have what it takes to persist, or the artist doesn't have to take what it's to persist and stick with it. Sticking with a creative process to ship is one of the hardest things.
Right.
Or maybe it's just something that we decide that we don't want to do.
Good point.
It's not something that speaks to us. It's not the type of product that we want to make.
Yeah.
Does that fall into you guys' six, the six?
Nah, it's almost. I would almost. Well, I don't need to speak for Rusty, but I would almost push it to the side to just sort of say, if I look at a project that I'm working on of any sort, it's a great tool. We talked about Seth Godin quite a bit, but I'll talk about Seth Godin again. Seth Godin has a great tool called the Acute Heptagram of Impact. Now, for listeners, a heptagram is a 7-pointed object. A heptagon is a 7-sided object. So you're talking about 7 things, and if you picture a shape in front of you with 7 sides, a heptagon, or a 7-pointed star, and you think about each of these 7 things, Seth Godin makes a case to sort of say, when you are assessing a project and asking yourself, how did this project work? How did it actually go well? Or, in the case of failure, this project totally came off the rails. What are 7 things you can look at? And those 7 things go like this. Number 1, when you look at the project as a whole, what was the strategy? What was the goal? What was the big thing you were trying to get done? Right after strategy comes tactics. And specific to tactics comes this idea of what are the specific things you're doing to pull off that plan, right? Then after you look at strategy, your plan, and your tactics, the way you're going to do that plan, you get into execution. Do you actually have what you need to actually execute on a bag made for the beach that's going to have a cooler for drinks and all that? No, we don't have the resources to execute on that concept. And now, once you get through your plan, your tactics on that plan, your ability to execute on that plan, do you have what it takes to persist and stick with it? Because oftentimes things that become a failure are simply things that you just didn't stick with. You didn't keep doing it, right? After persistence comes reputation. So you've got this question of, do you have the reputation with everyone that you're working with to pull this off? So for example, you might have a really great idea for building an app that's going to change the lives of everybody in the world who downloads this app. But you're a no-name app maker, and you're showing up as number 10,000 on the search results inside the app marketplace. You don't have the reputation to make the impact that you were trying to make. And so there's a big question whenever we're working on a project here and reputation comes up. Do we have the reputation with this artist? Do we have the reputation with our market to accomplish it? After reputation, you've got this question of desire. And this is something that Rusty talked about, the decision that you might actually change your mind one day. You might actually wake up and look at what you're working on and say, you know what, I don't even want to work on this anymore. And if that happens, you're fucking screwed. You don't want to work on it, it's not going to happen.
Right,
and if the artist doesn't want to work on it, if they have no desire to see their art in a backpack, shit ain't going to work.
Right,
Finally, after those 6 things, you land on fear. And the question about fear is, when you look at everything you're trying to do with this project and you're wondering why it fell apart, there's a big question, which is, at any point in the process, what was something that you were scared of, too scared to do? And that's a hard question to answer, and it's a hard question to look at. But oftentimes, we'll look at something that we were working on. Why did it fall apart? We had a perfect strategy. We had a great plan. We had the perfect tactics that were going to help us pull off that plan. We were able to execute on those things. We were willing to stick with it. We had the reputation with our audience that we needed. We had the desire to get it done, but we were too fucking scared to actually ship it. We were too scared to do that one piece of execution that would have taken us to the finish line. We were too scared because it was too much risk, or it was too difficult, or it took too much time, or whatever it might be. So you take those 7 things in stride. Seth Godin's, again, the acute heptagram of impact. If you Google that, Seth Godin, the acute heptagram of impact, you'll find his blog post from many years ago about this model. And that assessment model of looking at something and saying, hey, wait a minute, we were working on this beautiful bag over here. What happened? Right. You look at those 7 things, and oftentimes you can find that there's one specific thing where there was a problem, or you might look at those 7 things and say it's not just one thing. I'll give you a great example. There was an artist I was super pumped to work with. I just knew it was going to work out. I was so excited. I'd had coffee with her. She knew what we were up to. She knew what we were working on. I brought her to a Backpacks for Dinner session, and she was contentious and upset with us the entire time throughout the conversation. At the end of the conversation, she left. It felt very awkward, and the conversation hadn't gone very well at all. And we knew immediately, we ain't fucking making a bag with her. It's not going to work. And when I go back through and try and figure out for you out of those 7 things, there were a lot of problems, right? There were a lot of problems when you look at the strategy of what we were trying to do, the way we were going about it, our ability to actually pull off what we were talking about, our willingness to stick with it, our reputation with the artist, which was clearly not there, and she did not have a desire to see her artwork on a backpack or make that work, and fear on her side and our side, fear of taking the risk of actually trying this. There was too much fear for us to move forward.
Do you think that just came down to not communicating enough, or just the ways that you communicated?
That's a great question. I would there's no doubt that happens, and I absolutely, to your question, pointedly to your question, I'll give you a pointed answer to I want to own 100%. It was not her, it was us. We weren't well organized. I'll give you another good example on Seth Godin's heptagram of impact. You look at the question of strategy. Here's a great question to ask yourself. You're assessing failure, you're assessing success, you're asking yourself about the strategy and the plan. Well, going into the conversation and going into the work, did everybody know what the plan was? That's a key question. Now, she knew that we wanted to make a bag, but she did not know that we had 6 ingredients. She did not know that we wanted to explore theme, and that we wanted to get into this story, and that we wanted to think about what goes in the bag and the packaging. And she's looking at us like, you guys are crazy.
I bet you guys talked about those 6 things to everybody after
that.
Not everybody, but most people.
Yes and no. I mean, I think there were a lot of lessons learned from that particular failure. There have been great lessons learned from other failures.
Well, I think building off of that, one of the key aspects is sometimes it's just not a good fit. Sometimes things fail on purpose or don't work out on purpose, and that's not a bad thing. That's not something you should be scared of. That's actually something you should applaud. Going back to the reputation aspect, I come from a marketing and brand background, so this is really important to me. It's our reputation with the artists, and how we collaborate with them, how we reward them for their work, how we communicate with them on a regular basis, and making sure that they're on the same page with us, and they care about what we're creating as much as we care about what we're creating, and they at least have an interest in that vision. And then our reputation with our customers and our followers in the marketplace, and the high standard that we're holding ourselves to with each new bag that we're creating, that it's something really interesting and compelling. It's something that's going to add value to all of our products. So if we put out a bag just for the sake of putting out a bag that we're not happy with, it reflects very poorly on us, and it in turn reflects poorly on all the other artists that we've worked with, that we're putting out like a substandard or a poorly thought out design. So I think part of it is finding the people to work with that are going to enhance the entire, like, we succeed together, we fail together, and creating a following between us and the artists, us and our followers and the artists that we work with. We're not making a bag for everyone, but we're making something that's really special to the people who get it.
That makes sense. I'd probably predict, if anything, and it makes total sense to me, that on average, it probably, if you got a certain number amount, I'd imagine that it probably wouldn't work out more times than less. But that makes sense to me, because to me, I kind of treat this like, I'm comparing this how people in relationships. I don't think we're all meant to date each other. I think people are specifically like puzzle pieces, but we're a 7 billion person puzzle piece. With that, there's going to be certain pieces that fit together that are meant to fit together, and some pieces that might fit together in shape.
Sure.
The colors just don't work out.
It's not fitting, it's not resonating, it's not working. Sure. No, I know what you mean.
With the egos, it can be very easy to take it personal. Oh, they
absolutely.
didn't like me. Oh, she didn't
Yeah,
like me.
oh,
But it's
absolutely.
none of that. Yeah, sometimes it just doesn't fit.
Absolutely.
Argue with me, if we met 6 months ago, I'm not ready for this. Like, I still might not be. But
Timing.
nonetheless, though, I feel much more ready for this now than I would have been 6 months ago or even last year. I feel like, and that wouldn't have nothing to do with you guys. It's just me in terms of the maturity of where I'm at with my artwork.
Yeah. Well, and that timing,
I wasn't even ready.
that timing, you talk about persistence and your willingness to stick with it and be patient over time, but there's also the just the timing of everything we're talking about and everything you just mentioned of does it line up and is it really going to work? We've had a number of artists who, if I had to guess with what went off the rails, it was on the behind the scenes that we didn't have access to sort of know or see what was happening with that artist, but that they didn't, the timing was off and they didn't really have the time to work on it that they needed to at that time, and then either they were embarrassed to follow up with us or whatever it might be, then it falls apart.
Right.
And
there could have been some that loved you guys, but maybe somebody had just passed away and they was just super stressed out. So maybe in the one meeting they came to sit with you guys, just wasn't in the best headspace, and just boom, from that, little things like that sometimes can just.
Well, the most important thing is being candid and having that relationship with the people that we work with, and being patient and being willing to reopen that. We have worked with some artists where the timing wasn't right when we first talked to them, but then 6 months, a year later, it works out and we've got a great opportunity to produce their work.
That's super dope.
Like Matt Hill.
Yeah, Matt Hill's a good example of that for sure.
Oh, we almost got through about everything. I think the last thing that I was just a little bit intrigued were, and I think we've already hinted at a little bit in terms of where you guys would like to see Badass Backpacks. So you guys already have ideas of the different bags that you guys are trying to make. You want some smaller bags, you want some bigger bags, maybe bags for the beach, bags for different settings and things like that. But you guys have such an integrity as well. I'm curious as to, in both of your opinions, what the apex to Badass Backpacks is in your own minds.
Sure. Yeah, I think we would probably have very different answers. I'll be curious to hear Rusty's. There's different parts about this project for me, I as a person in my own space and who I am, I daydream a lot. And so I'm a daydreamer. I can spend a lot of time enjoying getting lost in visions of grandeur and things that I hope for and work for and dream of and envision. And so some of that is there. The best way I can answer that question is to say that I absolutely have a dream of growing this to a point of sustainability, where as a project that we could be producing bags and producing beautiful art and producing beautiful projects at a volume and at a level of beautiful sustainability and beautiful growth, and that it could grow from where it is now. We're a 2-person team. We collaborate with a lot of folks. We, of course, outsource a lot of our work. We pay, back to some of the questions from earlier about how we actually went about getting these bags made. I don't know if we ever clarified. We are paying somebody to sew these bags. The company we pay to put them together and to manufacture them, it's a company out in Vancouver, Washington called Last US Bag. And, all of those different little people that come in to help us pull this off, we take the money from bags that we sell, and that goes right into materials and costs for building our next rounds of bags. I have a dream of taking this next level to where we can be producing, shipping, making beautiful artwork, and growing it quite a bit. I do see a ceiling for it, and you get into market economics, the backpack space is quite crowded, but I would be a little bit assertive in saying that the market for backpacks that are beautiful and come with big questions about your journey built in is not a very well tapped market. There's a lot of space for us. Yeah.
Cheap ass backpacks.
Yeah.
There's not that many in the middle.
That's right. There's
nice and designer and
That's right. There's not many bags out there in the market that do what we're trying to do. So we do see ourselves as a unique outlier in the market. I do think there's room for growth. I do see it getting quite a bit larger, and I'm working to make it happen. I don't know what that apex will be, but I certainly hope we can keep shipping more bags, keep working with more artists, and keep making something that's really beautiful.
think like, just before we get to Rusty real quick, my bad, Rusty, think something of your own store of sorts that maybe branch out into other stores, or do you want to work with?
Oh yeah, man. No. So let me see. Let me see if I can break this down real quick for style here. And Rusty, please feel free to just come right in and kick me in the head as I talk through all this shit. Okay. So there's a couple things in my daydream vision. Let me paint this picture for you here. Let me paint Adam Lemon's daydream for badass backpacks. All right. So I already iterated that we're going to be working with lots of different artists to make lots of different beautiful bags. Absolutely, there will be a flagship store. And in that flagship store, when you walk in, there is a wall of beautiful backpacks. And in that retail space that's designed in a way where you can interact with our staff and our people who can help you think about the big questions that each of our bags represent. You can spend time there connecting with and thinking about the journey that you're going to go on and what you might choose to put inside. To take that retail space to the next level, there are a couple of things I daydream about.
I can see that.
Thank you. That's awesome that you
come in and then they have what kind of bag do you need for the journey today?
Yeah, what are you up to? What are you up to? Where are you going? What is your story? The journey you are on is real. You are amazing, and we want to help you on that journey. Tell us about you. Tell us about where you're headed. Tell us about who you're becoming. There's a company in Malaysia called Mind Valley. And Mind Valley is run by a gentleman, Vishen Lakhani. I admire a lot of the work that Vishen has done. One of the things that he brought to Mind Valley as he's grown his business from Kuala Lumpur, from Malaysia, is in their offices in Kuala Lumpur, they have the stage of awesomeness. The Hall of Awesomeness. I'm sorry, Vishen, I got it wrong there, buddy. The Hall of Awesomeness. And the Hall of Awesomeness, as described on their website, is a gift from Mind Valley to the city of Kuala Lumpur. And it is a space to bring conversation, to bring difficult conversations, to bring people together. It has a stage for presentations. They engage the community and they engage leaders from all over the world in important conversations that we need to be having. I dream that for Badass Backpacks, we're going to have Stage Badass. And Stage Badass is going to be exactly that. And I'm sorry, Vishen, I'm stealing your idea. I'm copying at a minimum. Is creating a space with what we're doing that we are nurturing and fostering in all ways, that we can create a space and we can create value, bringing people together, giving our communities a space to have conversations about big questions that matter, because we are all on a journey. It's a beautiful journey. It's important. I want to help us all get there.
Except if you have really, really bad luck
All right, Rusty.
So in some ways, my dream and my vision is a little bit simpler, less grandiose than what Adam just described. But in other ways, it's a little more ephemeral, and it really
A little more what?
ephemeral.
Temporary,
Well, yeah, well,
fleeting.
more whimsical. Like it's not as concrete or grounded as opening a store or having a flagship store. It really centers around three big things that are important to me. One is I want to see us continue to evolve and expand and to go deep with the stories that we're telling around our product. So we've already talked about the product itself being a story and conveying a theme and idea and concepts, asking big questions, the packaging, the reactions that people have. But we want to take that to another level. We work with these incredible, amazing artists who have fascinating stories of their own, and we want to help promote their ideas and their concepts and their thoughts, and we want to help them tell their stories, and we want to share that with our audience. So one of the things that we're launching earlier this year is sort of a backstage pass, which would give some of our followers, fans, a closer insider look to our process, how we came about, what we do on a daily basis, and also the chance to interact with and engage with the artists that we work with, and to get like that deeper, richer picture of what they're creating and what we've created together. The second thing, sort of building on that, is I have personally become a collector of backpacks. Obviously I have some personal ties to this, but a lot of my friends are also becoming collectors, and that's sort of what I want to push. I want to push this concept and get to a point where backpacks become a collector's items, where it comes another part of self-expression or your fashion sense, your outfit. It's something that you switch in and out depending on your mood or where you're going, and then you have 3 or 4, 5 or 6 different backpacks that you can show off and you can take with you to different events, and each one has their own story and their different style and their different themes that reflects a different aspect of your personality. So I've got a wall in my apartment where I just hang like all the different backpacks and all the different prints from the artists that we work with. I don't own them all yet, but I'm getting there. So in effort to that, we're also starting a collectors club where we're hoping to get our customers more engaged, and for those people who want to collect multiple backpacks to display them just like they would display any other pieces of art, they have a great accessible opportunity to do so as we continue to build the business and release new lines and work with new artists. And then the third thing is really building upon and engaging our community in new ways. One of the big inspirational business stories that have driven our strategy was Threadless, and having that community where regular people, like anybody, could submit artwork and designs, and then the community would decide democratically what they liked, what they enjoyed, and it would get produced and put out there. Another one in Mondo Tees does similar sorts of aspects. So I want to, this is probably a little bit further, but I want to build a community where we can reach out to our audience and get them involved in our creative process and our collaborative process, get them interacting with us and with our artists, submitting ideas, submitting feedback, submitting themes, and helping to shape the products that we create.
Tapping into your marketing side.
Exactly.
That's brilliant. That's really dope. Cool way of into this and how that can right, I think that's really awesome. All right, now I'm gonna start with you. Then we'll go to Adam. We're already on you anyway. If this is the individual goal, perfect. Not a trick question by any means. If you have any other individual goals, and depending on what those are, how do you balance those individual goals and those individual dreams with this stream of building better?
Yeah, so one of the key things that keeps me going in this project and drew me to the project from the very beginning is this is a creative outlet, and this is something that I and Adam sort of own fully, and we can drive forward with this business. I've worked in the agency world and client services, and I'm always creating something for somebody else. Somebody else gets to make all the final decisions, and they get to, we can push them, we can compel them, but at the end of the day, they succeed or fail based upon what's important to them and what's important to what they're trying to do. And I've really always seen this project as a way to experiment and to bring my own ideas to life, and to go out there and get this real world experience in driving a business, driving a concept, an idea, and a movement out into the world, and being brave enough to do things a little bit differently, and hoping that they pan out.
It's a really open-minded. So it wasn't specific. I want this job, this thing. I like that. That was more internally focused, because I think if we focus on some of the internal things, the external things that we want become so much easier in focusing on those internal things. So
Yeah.
really
Well, I mean,
I'm so surprised by that from you, but
it really stems from being in the business world for so long, being inspired by some great business thinkers, some of who we've talked about today, and from different events that I go to, and being frustrated with some of the decisions that people make from a business perspective, and thinking I can do it better. And this is my platform to prove that, and to experiment and to create something really meaningful. Like, to not just create a business that's going to create shareholder value, but creating something really meaningful for the community and for the world.
Yeah, putting more beauty into the world. It's kind of oversimplified, and maybe not. It maybe doesn't encompass the full picture of everything that we want to do, but the idea of creating more beauty and putting more beauty into the world, I think, is something I celebrate, and something that I enjoy in working with artists and seeing artists work to create beauty in a world that could use more of it. I think is a beautiful part of this project, a beautiful part of the opportunity. For me, outside of this, though, how do I balance everything else that's going on with what's happening here? It's a beautiful question, and it's a difficult one. As a creative, much like Rusty, this is a huge space for me. It's a huge, important project. It's a milestone of my life that it's a space in my life that really gives me a lot that I don't have outside of it. So I'm very grateful and always very appreciative to have this project as something to work on. I'm a father of 3 children. And as other parents listening to this podcast can definitely relate to and understand, being a parent, there's a lot of demands on time. And I have 3 kids. My wife tapped into a thought leader out there named Carrie Conti, carrieconti.com. She's an amazing person who does a lot of amazing things. We participated in a workshop with Carrie Conti. Really helped me a lot, where Carrie helped us think about ourselves as individuals and the lives that we're leading and the things that we're trying to do. And she gave us 4 things to think about. To think about our role as a parent, and thinking about all of the work and all of the things that we have to have in our mind to work on parenting, and to guide ourselves as parents, to help ourselves as parents. We have our partner, which in my case is my wife, Nancy, who's an amazing partner. And there's a lot of work that goes into relationship and to nurturing that partnership. And there's a lot of thought and a lot of planning and work that has to happen for a partnership to thrive and to do well. There is your professional life, which is of course your work and your trade that you commit yourself to, and the work that you commit yourself to doing. And in your professional life is important to think about in so many ways. It's how you make your living. It's how you establish your identity in a lot of cases. So the professional aspect of my life is an important one to consider. And the fourth, it's also a P. The fourth one is to have this bucket where you think and work on prosperity, and the idea that money and finance is something that you have to have pulled together to feel really good about the fact that you've got this full life, this full landscape with so much going on. You've got your parent, you're a parent, you've got your role as a partner, you've got your role in your professional life where you're trying to move things forward and make things happen, and then you've also you got to have on the radar the fact that you got to pay the bills, because when you can't pay the bills, you don't feel good, and it can really squeeze you pretty hard. Interestingly enough, on that having to pay the bills, that is a very important part about the creative life and the creative world that a lot of different writers have spoken about, and a lot of thought leaders out there like Austin Kleon, who's a writer of a very popular book called Show Your Work, as well as another book called Feel Like an Artist. Austin Kleon's an amazing author, and in several of his blog posts and in his books, he makes mentions of if you're going to lead a creative life and if you're going to thrive in a creative life, you have to make sure you're keeping the bills in check. And I've definitely experienced, as I've bitten off and focused solely in my professional life on Badass Backpacks, that not having a reliable source of income like I did whenever I was working my corporate job 40 hours a week, it complicates things greatly by in a lot of ways. So, those four things, my role as a parent is a huge focus of mine. My role as a partner, my professional life and prosperity, and that fifth one that's out there of just who am I as a person, and how am I going to nurture that? It's a lot to balance. And to your question of how do I balance it, I'm fucking terrible at balancing it. I have no balance. And there's a great quote out there by Philippe Petit, who's the guy in that movie called Man on Wire, and he's an artist to the max, and they ask him about the art of balancing, and he points above balance, and he says, "Oh, balance? No, there is no balance. There is only the act of balancing." Yeah, it's a big one. It's on that movie Man on Wire. It's a good movie, and I love that concept that I can clearly, as we've mentioned earlier in this conversation, I can say with certainty I don't have balance. I certainly am in a overdrive state 99% of the time of trying to find my balance, and it's tough work, but I'm working at it.
That makes so much sense. I always think of a teeter-totter in terms of balance. It's always going back and forth. It's never just, even when it looks like it's just perfectly still, it's not. Very constant, positive, negative.
Yeah, no doubt. There's ups and downs with all of it, for sure.
That's amazing. That's a good way to wrap it right there with the balance it. I'm trying to balance this baby out. That's awesome.
That's awesome, dude. Thank you so much for having us, man. This has been
a
blast.
Thank you guys. Yeah, I could force out some other things, but I think this will be a really exciting period. I believe in you guys so much. I think you guys' vision.
Thank you,
awesome.
man.
I think the way you guys work with each other is awesome. Even the way you guys have found ways to communicate and just effortlessly go back and forth, and knowing like, well, maybe I should ask this. Maybe I should ask that. Just y'all's balance is just phenomenal. I think you guys, even if you don't feel balanced right now, I think it's gonna come. I believe in you guys wholeheartedly.
Thank you, man.
It'll be an awesome experience later on down the road. So I want my stuff on the back. I want to do it. I love this challenge of opening up my mind to create this experience, and it's so much bigger than just having something cool on the backpack. I would love to get to that point of having something on the backpack and us having like a more celebratory episode.
Oh, I would love that.
We got to
I would
that
absolutely
point.
love that,
You know,
man. We'd love to come back.
Yeah, we did it, motherfuckers. Having that cool little moment. And then if there's any other questions that I'm like, I could have asked them that.
Yeah, man, bring
We'll
it
get
back.
to it
Absolutely.
then,
We'll
yeah.
look forward to coming back anytime. We're thrilled to have been able to do this tonight and look forward. And yeah, for all the listeners out there, we can't wait to make a backpack with Kyle's art on there as well. We're looking forward to that. So we'll make it happen, and we'll check in with you guys. We'll see where this all lands, man.
After we wrap this, we'll talk about it. I think I got it.
Nice.
Yeah, for any intrigued Follow them. They have badass backpacks on Instagram and other things. But look at their website, badassbackpacks.com. I'm assuming you guys have some images on there as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can
Right,
check out
yeah,
some of
so-
our bags. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna
absolutely.
take some pictures as well, so I can slide some pictures of some of you guys back in this episode.
Hell yeah, man!
Get to
Absolutely.
see some
Yeah,
of the stuff
we
that
can
we're
definitely
talking about.
do that for you.
Yeah, and we'll do that. Like I said, I'm going to repeat it again. Badassbackpacks.com. Check them out. Get your own experience of the bag. Check it out. And stay patient with them because they're still in the growing process. So there's going to be some things that
Yeah.
evolve with this. I think it's important to follow somebody when they're in the same part of evolving. Then you get to say you was a part of that as well. You got to witness them come from the part where they was in Yahala all the time to the point of making their own badass backpacks, chain stores, and all of that. But it's gonna conclude the Artist Podcast, episode 9. Yeah, episode 9. Thank you guys again so much. Like, comment, subscribe, all the cute YouTube stuff, of course. Appreciate anybody. Let's see where we at. I knew he was gonna get the 2 hours.
We'll throw out the last thing here for people who listen all the way to the end. If you guys want to grab a discount on our website, go to our website, badassbackpacks.com, click to shop, type in the discount code TRACKSTAR at checkout, and as you push your way through checkout there, you get a nice 10% discount there on any bag that you want to buy from our website.
That's awesome. Yeah, for the 20 or 30 people who watch this on YouTube. Yeah,
Go grab it,
ahead,
man.
Check that out. What if this went viral and then something?
Make it happen.
That'd be nuts. But in due time, y'all. But concluding another episode. I appreciate anybody for listening this long, staying with this process. And once again, badassbackpacks.com. Can't say it enough. Check them out. Concluding another episode, and we out, y'all.